Hey, what's going on guys? My name is Rampage and welcome to my Watch Dogs benchmark video. Now my PC specs are an Intel Core i5 2500K clocked at 4.5 GHz with 16 gigs of Kingston HyperX, 1600 MHz RAM overclocked to 1866 MHz, and an Asus GTX770 further overclocked, as you can see here, to 1202 MHz with 4000 MHz times 2, so 8000 MHz on the memory, a Corsair RM850 power supply. So, what are the graphical settings? Now, if we go to display, you can see that I'm playing at 1080p, aspect ratio is auto, so 16:9, full screen VSync off, GPU max buffered frames 1, and I'll also show you what the difference is between turning them up to 5 and keeping it to 1 in a moment as well. Textures on Ultra, it is recommended to have a 3 gig graphics card, but I'll show you what happens when you don't have a 3 gig card, and I'll be testing it with different anti-aliasing techniques, not just TXAA. There's MSAA, there's temporal SMAA, there's SMAA, FXAA, and all this other shit. So anyway, let's get started, shall we? Apply that. Graphics quality, alright, Ultra, level of detail, shadows, reflection, all on Ultra. Ambient occlusion, HBAO plus high, motion blur and depth of field on, water, Ultra, shader, high. So I'm not really sure what shaders are, but anyway, whatever. I assume it's got something to do with shadows, but not too sure. So as you can see here, before it even loads, you can see that the game is pretty much maxing out my VRAM, and you'll see the frames in a second. And there's 30 frames. Oh, 30 frames per second. And apparently I'm transparent. Everything's transparent. Well, that's unfortunate. Not entirely sure why that's happening, but okay then. That's a new issue, I guess. All cars are transparent. Yeah, well, this is going to be unfortunate. A lot of textures have become transparent. I'm assuming because I'm running out of VRAM, that's why that's happening. Not entirely too sure. But anyway, so you've got about 32 frames per second. Now, apparently this is with TXAA, and this is not the performance that I was getting before, so I'm assuming it's because of every texture in the game is being transparent. So, anyway, let's turn MSAA to 8 times. When it wants to load. Here we go. Here we go. There, yep, there we go. One frame per second. Yep, that's gonna be great. I'll be able to play the game like that, totally. Alright, so... oh no! Options. There we go. Display. MSAA, turn that down to 2. Let's see what happens now. Oh, 4 frames. 14, 30, 20, 18. Oh god, that's terrible. So if we turn temporal SMAA on, what's the performance like? Oh, 23. 40, 50, 43, 30. That constant stuttering, bro. That is ridiculous. Alright, now keep in mind that I do have everything on Ultra and shit, even though texture quality to Ultra isn't recommended on my card at all. But I still don't believe this game should be using 2 gigs VRAM. That's just ridiculous. And for some reason, turning SMAA is actually giving me worse performance than temporal SMAA. Now, if we turn on FXAA, oh, and you can see that the textures aren't actually transparent anymore, so it must have been TXAA. But yeah, FXAA performance is dreadful. As you can see there, it dropped to 16 frames per second from about 23 frames per second. And if we turn VSync off completely, it drops to 30 frames, 11 frames, sorry. But it's at 40, so it's not too bad. But what happens if we Can't actually turn that off yet, but alright. what happens if we turn texture quality down to high? Options, display, textures to high. There we go. Now once you've started up the game doesn't actually take as long to load, but it's still on the lengthy side of things anyway. It's still quite annoying. There we go. Alright, so 36 frames per second. Now remember that this is completely maxed out with texture quality set to high and no anti-aliasing, yet I was getting more frames beforehand with temporal SMAA, so that doesn't really make any sense. Unless I still have FXAA on, I'm not too sure. No, I don't. Okay, so graphics quality, let's turn some of these things down. So if you turn down ambient occlusion down to MHBAO, and you keep everything else on ultra and on, what is the performance like? 40 frames per second. And I'm not even going anywhere, right? So let's just get in a car real quick. Another thing that I'd like to point out before I actually get into the other settings and turning shit down is that there's no blood in this game. Not entirely sure why. Let me know if you guys have blood in your game, but apparently in Australia this game is supposed to be an R18 plus game, and yet there's no blood in it whatsoever. I just thought that was weird, but anyway, alright, let's turn some of this other shit down. So if we turn ambient occlusion off completely, what is the frames like? So remember, it was around 40 frames per second. So it's about 55 frames per second. So it's it's about 10% increase. Probably a bit more than that, but my maths is shit, so forgive me. Okay, so 52 frames, 59, 60, and it only goes to around 60 because there's nothing here. Hold on, let me just try and get out of here real quick. Alright, so it drops to 44 frames per second. 43. So, as you can see, the game doesn't really run that great. To be completely honest, I think this game kind of looks like Saints Row 4. Just with slightly a bit more visual fidelity. But performance-wise, it runs like garbage. Alright, so if we turn off motion blur and depth of field, what is the frames like? So it's around 52 to 55 on average. So it's gone up about 4 frames. And it drops to 45. Like, if this game didn't drop so much, it wouldn't be that bad. Like, I'd be able to tolerate it. But since it does drop constantly and it basically never stops dropping, it makes the experience a lot more regrettable than anything else. Alright, so what happens if we turn water down to medium and shader down to medium? Also turn shadows down to medium as well. Keep level of detail at ultra. Remember, this is with VSync off, so this reflects real-time performance of how your game should perform with my setup. And keep in mind that this game is horribly optimized as well, and it is Ubisoft, so you could have expected that from day one anyway. And as you saw then, it dropped about 10 frames because I hit someone. But the top frames that it is currently getting is 81, 82 frames per second. That's the highest it'll get, but I'm not actually doing anything currently. But yeah, I can run I'll show you the settings that I should be playing with that should work. Everything's set to high with ambient occlusion, motion blur, and depth of field off. And there's 82 frames, right? So if we drive around a bit, just quickly, yep, it dropped to 56 frames per second as I turned around the corner. And remember, this was getting about 70 to 80, right? Now, if we screw around with the GPU max buffer frames, if we turn that to 5, you'll see probably massive performance issues. But it will kind of keep it around 60 anyway, but then it will try and drop. 54. And my GPU is using 56%, 78%, 85%. The second percentage after the degrees is the usage, and then the first one is the power output. So 76% of power is being driven to my GPU, which isn't really that good, to be completely honest. Normally with VSync off, the GPU would try to run at 99%, and that's not the case with this game. It's constantly stuttering between usage, and it's not a great experience. It is probably the most horribly optimized game of this current generation, and it's really dreadful, to be completely honest. Now if I go out of the game here and turn texture quality down to if I turn that down to medium, get rid of the GPU max buffer frames, performance should be a little bit better. Now keep in mind that I would probably end up playing like this anyway, maybe a bit lower with the graphics settings, but the game shouldn't be running this terrible, right? It's about 70 frames per second. Let's see how far it drops. Now this is with texture quality on medium here, guys. So as you can see, it didn't really change from setting it from ultra to high, and then from medium, performance-wise, right? So let's see what the lowest drop is. So far it's about 68, 66. Now if this stays above 60, no, 59 frames. So as soon as there's some kind of particle effects, the game just decides to kill itself for some unknown reason. So, alright, let's see what happens with VSync on. So if we turn VSync on to 1 frame, I don't know why this VSync even exists. I don't like it. I think it's kind of pointless. But anyway. So, if we just try and dip the frame rate by destroying heaps of stuff. So far it's been at 59. It's kind of running a little bit better than it was before without VSync on, which doesn't really reflect much, but really weird optimization with VSync off. As you saw then, it dropped to 57 or 56 frames per second. 54, I believe that it just dropped to 40 something. I didn't actually catch that, but I just saw a 4. So it's not dropping as horribly, but it still drops, and when it drops, you bloody well feel it, right? What happens when we switch VSync to frame 2? It locks to fucking 30 frames per second for no reason. Just out of nowhere, it just locks to 30, and it runs horribly. 15 frames per second. Right? So if you're looking forward to Watch Dogs on PC, I'd personally wait for either Nvidia, AMD, or even Ubisoft to fix their bloody drivers or their game. You know, I'm currently using the 337.88 Nvidia driver. Now, if you have an AMD card, there's a beta catalyst driver that you can get that should give you better performance. But I'm curious to know what the difference between an AMD 290 and my card is, right? Or an AMD 290 versus a 780 or something. Just, if you have a different card other than mine, let me know your performance and your average frames per second, because I'm interested to know as what you're getting. But anyway, guys, I hope you have enjoyed my benchmark video for Watch Dogs, but if there is an optimization patch for Watch Dogs, or if there's a driver optimization or something like that that comes out within the next week or so, I'll be sure to make another benchmark video recapping what I've been talking about in this video. So anyway, guys, please don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next benchmark. Peace out.